Should we have electronic verification for letting people work? What is the iron law of woke projection? Should the TSA be abolished? We tackle these questions and more on this episode of Good Take, Bad Take. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Good Take, Bad Take. This is the show where we go through our social media feeds, we find the best and worst takes we can, we break them down, and hopefully offer some insightful commentary along the way. My name is Donald, and I'm here with my co-host Britt. And before we get started, just a reminder to click like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It really does help us out, and we appreciate it. Follow us at Good Take, Bad Take Pod on Instagram, Good Bad Take Pod on Twitter and YouTube. Without further ado, we're going to get into our first take, and this is a comic edit someone has shared, and it is the classic Charlie Brown with Lucy holding up the football, and Lucy is saying to Charlie Brown, if you keep working hard and put the company's best interests before your own, then the company will share its prosperity with you. And of course, the implication being that's the lie being sold, and then the moment Charlie Brown goes to kick the football, she'll pull it up and he'll fall on his back, as the classic trope goes. So what do you think about this claim and the setup here, Brett?
See that it's a bad take.
Yeah.
But this is kind of a tricky argument because it's true in some cases, right? It's not necessarily true as a principle, but it's definitely true in some cases in that there are awful companies that you work for that they go and turn and burn people. I think about someone close to me who worked at a job right out of college, and this place basically was targeting new grads, getting them at a really low salary rate, telling them that like, hey, you're never going to have it any better anywhere else, and like you got to contribute to the bottom line of this business. And they just would turn and burn, and they had people on staff purely to just get new grads in because they had a ratio they were trying to maintain. Obviously, the prosperity of that company didn't flow downwards, and the company paid for it, in that they were never able to keep anyone on staff for much longer than a couple months to a year. And anyone that they did have longer than that had drank the Kool-Aid so badly that they actually left earning potential on the table when their colleagues that wised up early left and went to other companies, right, that wanted to attract really good talent, that wanted to have really, really good people in good positions, generating lots of value and maximizing the amount of revenue per employee. And they would attract those by having really awesome benefits, really great work culture, the ability to work remote and things like that. So this is true in some instances. But the thing is that's awesome about free market capitalism, and this meme is trying to infer that the bait and switch of free market capitalism is that if you create value, then they'll pass some of it down to you. But that's really not the case. It actually is the case in the best run companies and the most successfully run companies, because they want to attract good talent. That's why literally whole divisions of recruiters exist to try and get people on board. If you're trying to recruit like a software engineer, you're going to have like an infrastructure of almost $1 million worth of people trying to get that software engineer on board your team. And so you don't want to get them on board your team because they're really valuable and then have them leave because you've treated them poorly, right? You also need to make sure that the position in the business that you're in is structured in such a way that you're going to make tons of good value by hiring those people. So this is not true as a principle. It is true from company to company, but those companies don't exist very long. And what's great is employees actually have a lot of power in that instance. They're not helpless like Charlie Brown flying up into the air and landing on his back.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that this is the way that it's being argued isn't exactly accurate to what claims are generally being made. So I think it's a little bit of a straw man argument, because when people generally promote the idea of working hard and dedicating yourself to your business or to the company you work for, the claim usually isn't put the company's best interests before your own. I wouldn't put it that way, and I don't think that that's I think it's pretty disingenuous to say that. I think most reasonable people who are promoting the idea of working hard and doing working hard to succeed, to raise your income, to provide for a family or for yourself or whatever, the claim there is, by working hard and by delaying your own gratification, then you are putting your own best interests at heart,
Yeah.
right?
That's
you're
fantastic
not
point.
doing it in a way to say, "Oh, I'm putting Google's best interest because I'm trying to I believe in Google and they deserve." Like the reason why you're trying to say, "Hey, you know what? Maybe you need to work late a couple times or work on a weekend here and there because even though that's your leisure time and you're sacrificing there, it's going to put you ahead either by the skills you get or down the road by the compensation you will receive from the company or the position it puts you in, the project, all those kinds of things. So the first thing I would say is no one really is trying to advocate that you're trying to put the company's best interest before your own, because ultimately the claim would be no, you're trying to put your own interests first, but sometimes your own interest, it is in your own interest to deny yourself in the short term so that down the road you get the long term. And so that's the first thing. And then that's kind of what they're saying is the false promise, in that they're saying, then the company will share its prosperity with you. But that's also not the promise that I think people of our persuasion would say. I think we would say that, in a well-managed healthy company, hard work and providing value like that does get paid off. And they will, share their prosperity with you in a lot of ways, in that you'll be promoted to do more things, have more responsibility, get higher compensation. There are also claims of value, like, in the example you gave, where if you're working really hard for a few years and you have, low compensation now, if you get that experience, you can then take that experience with you to another company that's willing to reward. Hey, you know what? You're able to do this much. We'll give you more for it. So, even in that scenario, we're not saying that the company you're currently working for is guaranteed to give you a raise. In many cases, they should and they ought to. But working hard and creating value and putting valuable skill sets to use and gaining those skills, oftentimes that is in your own best interest. You just need to be aware of when that means staying at the company and when that means taking your talent elsewhere. I don't think anyone here is saying doggedly work for a company, sacrifice all of your nights, all of your time, put it in front of your family, put it in front of everything you ever want to do having fun, and then never leave that company and just say it's for their benefit. No one's claiming that. No one wants you to claim that, except for maybe the very cheesy corporate people in a I don't know, Marvel TV show or something, who are the villains at the end of the day.
Yeah, and like since coming into like big corporate world, there is somewhat of this attitude every now and then, which is like people like management consultants, third party consultants, people that Pete Buttigieg used to work for, McKinsey, like they will tell companies like, hey, in order for you to get the best out of people, you need to make this environment where they're willing to sacrifice everything. Which of course, like consultants are just full of bull crap. They don't actually. Sometimes they produce value, but like a lot of times at those levels, it's just like it's a social club for like Harvard graduates and stuff like that. So there is a little bit that seeks in to companies. What's funny is it usually comes from people on the left that already hold this position, right? They're like, well, we need to provide some sort of family feeling to this company, or we are, this company, we're this company family, or things like that. It's like, yeah, work is not supposed to fill that void. I totally agree with that premise. But also, you are supposed to fill the void of responsibility, right? At the end of the day,
Right.
you're hired for a job. You got to show up to produce more than you consume. In the grand scheme and aggregate of all the inputs and outputs of the market, like you need to produce more than you consume. And if you're not doing that, then there won't be a company to pass prosperity to you. And the fact of the matter is most of the time, if you're joining a company that is somewhat mature, right, that's been going for 10, 12 years, has 100 plus, 500 plus employees in it, the momentum that you're riding off of was built by other people that worked 90 hours, 100 hours a week for maybe 5, 10 years, all the time to build momentum that now carries you, and now you're just stewarding that momentum forward. There are people that are hired, sales folks a lot of time are supposed to create new momentum. That's why that job is incredibly hard and things like that. But it's also directly tied to revenue, so they can tell if you're consuming more than you're producing. So yeah, this meme is like true in a one way, but it's not true overall. Like you were saying, it's like this gets the entire view of what work is completely wrong, and then kind of straw mans it inaccurately.
Yeah, I do think that there are some corporate culture things that are goofy, like like you mentioned, where they're like, oh, sacrifice everything, but even the companies that have that, extreme intensity, oftentimes the reward that people get in that is compensation or prestige, right?
And
So
it's disproportionate to how much they produce sometimes too.
right, and so it's to me, it's a little bit funny because the one time that where I might be like, okay, well, this meme has a point when it because there are people in the corporate culture who, they live to work rather than work to live in many ways, and they're driving but those people generally are getting compensated crazy amounts for the work they're doing,
Yeah.
and that's why they're so into it. Or that, I think about Kevin O'Leary, the guy who's on Shark Tank, businessman. He had that quote where he was like, there. I tell my employees, like, if I hope the people who want that work life balance, I hope they're working for the other guy. Packing up, closing up at 5. I hope they're my competitor. I'm like, yeah, that might be unhealthy, but also he might be trying to do things and trying to run an industry and a business where he needs people like that. And in order to get people who are like that, you have to pay them high because there is competition, and there are places that are going to offer a better, work life balance, whether that means less compensation or it means some other kind of trade off. But people act as though all of these things exist in a vacuum, and the only kinds of companies that are never going to keep paying you money are also going to be the ones demanding all this extra time of you, and there's no other choices. And that's why this meme, the spirit of it may be right, in that if this is happening to you, this is a toxic mentality and you shouldn't just buy it carte blanche. But I think it's trying to speak more broadly to the idea of work and capitalism. And I think right now our culture is such that if you're, if your primary concern is, oh man, this company's overworking me, the odds are that in so many cases they're not. It's just that don't want to work hard in this particular case.
The last stat I'll mention on this, and I've heard Jordan Peterson say it a lot, and it's true, is that people over their lifetime of their career, people who work 10% more hours make 40% overall more like revenue, I guess you could
Right.
say, or take home pay than people who don't. So I think that's disproportionate to the amount of extra time worked and effort put in potentially.
Yes. Yep. I think that's a great point. Okay, moving on to our next take here. This comes from Representative Thomas Massey. And Thomas Massey tweets, I will not vote to require every American to get Biden's permission if they want to work. Specifically, I'm opposed to e-verify. Giving the federal government more power over you is a mistake, in my opinion. I support border security, but not e-verify. So a little bit of context, if you're not aware, there is a big package right now before the House, and it's being promoted by the House GOP, and it's a big border security thing that undoes some of the Biden administration's changes since the Trump administration happened, those kinds of things. And one of the requirements is an e-verify authentication in order for people to verify whether or not they have the proper credentials to work in the country. And this, of course, creates an electronic database system where people are tracked on whether or not they can work. So Thomas Massey is opposed to this, which is bucking his party. It is a Republican proposal. So that's a little bit of context. What do you think about this take, Britt?
I think it's good. I it's difficult, and I wonder what his overall strategy is behind this. To because I know Thomas Massey loves freedom, so he's always angling to make that happen. It reminds me of a conversation I was having this weekend with some extended family of mine that are from Oklahoma, and Oklahoma just passed a school choice bill, which is, in
Yeah.
my opinion, fairly awesome. And I was asking, this extended family member what their position was on it. Very homeschool oriented person, and they're like, well, I think it's still good anytime you give money that was stolen back to parents and stuff. That's a good thing. But the concern that they had was that, like, you know if you start taking money from the government, you're doing a deal with the devil. Right now, you've got
Yeah.
them involved with your homeschooling, and the whole point of homeschooling was to keep the government out of your education. Now they have somewhat of a excuse to be involved with it. So, to me, if the government exists, if we have to have this thing, if I'm a minarchist, the one thing that probably matters the most, or that should be on this very, very short list of things that are provided, is that you keep whatever we define as the country secure, right? Like, how is it a country? How can you justify being a government and having all this infrastructure if you're not going to at least keep the border secure? And so, yeah, Thomas Massey, good to support that because obviously, like, the government's going to exist. And then on top of that, it's like we don't want to have bad mechanisms for enforcing that. Like, if someone is here illegally and they have gotten a job and an employer deems their skills high enough to like provide value and a return, like that person should be here, right? Like that's actually a net positive for our country, and that's a really really good thing. So who cares, you know? And I think that his insight into how this kind of is a deal with the devil, and that's what I'm reading into it. But that's
Yep.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair and correct. I think in particular it is a very noble position to take when you are one of two so far Republicans
Jeez,
that's
who's the
who are
other?
opposed to it. Now, the other one is really funny. It's Dan Crenshaw.
What?
and, and he's opposed to it because it doesn't address the drug cartels at all
Oh,
or something. So
all
it's
right.
like, the doing the right thing for the wrong reason, I guess. But
Yeah.
uh yeah, I think that's exactly right. This to me is very much reminiscent of the Republicans being all gung-ho on stuff like for the Patriot Act, and now it's
Yes.
being used against them. And one of the points that Thomas Massey makes in other, longer form articles that I read about this take is that he's saying we just went through COVID vaccination stuff that was completely unscientific and draconian enforcement still persisted. We're literally giving the government a massive way to enforce a vaccine mandate on all Americans with a flip of a switch.
Yeah.
You can now just deny someone's e-verification status and you cannot be hired. And so I think that Thomas Massey is the canary in the coal mine here, where the Republicans are like, yeah, just give the power to the government to fix this one problem, without realizing that they're loading the gun and handing it to the government, who's just going to turn and point it right back at them down
Yeah.
the road. And we're seeing this with January 6th. We're gonna see it if we pass E-Verify. I think it's a completely reasonable take to have. And as far as the school choice thing you bring up, I completely agree that that is the concern with school choice and vouchers and things like that. Um, I think that the moment you are able to tie the money with the private institutions or the homeschooling, and you make it have it, you give the government control over those institutions, you create a problem. But on the other hand, one of the benefits will be that when you remove funding from those schools, the teachers unions should lose power
Yes.
and should lose influence.
It's a way
That's
more
kind of
balanced thing than this is. This is one way. It's not
Yes,
good
exactly. Yeah, just
overall.
just because I've been thinking about that school choice thing a lot myself, and that's kind of the thing is, whenever you're in politics, talking about politics and action and inaction and what's right and just, sometimes, you have to look at a situation like, is this a Faustian bargain, or is this trying to escape a private doom? And the thing is, I don't know if the school choice is a Trojan horse, but right now my hunch is that it's an overall good thing, and will it will help remove some power from the school unions, and their influence over some elections. My other thought is, if governments want to take over homeschooling and start regulating it, they're going to find a way to do that one way or the other. So
Yeah.
if the path is that we're worried about them trying to do that through a means that gives parents a way to get out of public schooling, I don't know. I'm a little bit more inclined to think that that's probably not the way that the government would like that process to go.
And I would say, like, in a fight, like, you're either winning or you're losing. Like, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about like Muay Thai and sparring. Like, you're either winning or you're losing. And I think that the school choice vouchers, like, is a reduction in government power. So
Yep.
therefore, it's like it's still winning, right? Like,
Yep.
you're
Yep.
you're in a better position, even though there might be a little bit of risk. It's kind of like you throw a punch and like you hit the person, and now you're in a little bit of a little bit of a cantankerous spot where they could counter you, but like you still landed a good blow, and that's
Yep.
all counts for. Whereas this is just like saying, I'm going to open my hands up and let you hit me however hard you want.
Yeah.
It's just purely giving the government power to determine who is eligible to work. It's prescribing the wrong, the opposite medicine for the disease that it's trying to treat. So Thomas Massey, as usual, great on this.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's all I've got to say on that,
Cool.
I think. Okay. So this one's a little bit longer here. This one is Phil Labonte, I believe.
The Bonte.
Labonte. Okay, sometimes those e's are pronounced, sometimes they're not. I never know. Okay, so Phil
Singer
Labonte.
from All That Remains.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is quote tweeting another tweet here, and this is about the shooting that just happened in Texas, and the first tweet here shows some images and about the shooter and reads, "The Allen shooter was a Tim Pool fan. He was inspired by libs of TikTok. These pundits caused stochastic terror. They know it, they don't care. They're losing the culture war and they want to hurt as many of us as they can." And Phil quotes them saying, "They are doing stochastic terror, the iron law of woke projection. The Timcast studio was swatted 15 times last year. The intent of swatting is to get people hurt or killed. This is absolutely stochastic terrorism. This is intentional. They know it. We know it." What do you think? And just to throw this out, a lot of other takes that I've seen are talking about how we immediately got the manifesto from this person, how they
Yeah.
talk about how they were inspired by libs of TikTok and then never reference libs of TikTok or anything related to what they've done. And we still haven't heard anything about the Nashville shooters manifesto, which
That's
is
too
so weird.
dangerous. Too
Which is
dangerous
so
to.
odd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway, so what do you think about Phil's
Phil's take is right. The iron law of woke projection. I don't think I've actually heard it put that way before. And it reminded me of some conversations I've had as of late. I was talking with someone and they were getting all up in arms about like, oh, I'm just so worried about this country. The red states are passing these laws that seem like they're trying to purposely, drive people out of them and segregate people and make the states redder and get the blue people to move out. And, we're seeing this even in Nashville, right now, or Tennessee, I mean, and that like, they censored and they kicked out these two representatives of color, and all they were doing was just protesting and stuff like that. I was like, man, like you got to help me with this because like my interpretation of the past 3 years has been blue states saying that you can't work, live, eat, sleep, go anywhere unless you get the approved vaccination. That the one side of the aisle is somehow latched onto as their thing. And then on top of that, there's this little thing that everyone likes to talk about, January 6th, where the only person that was actively murdered in it was someone on the Trump side by a state agent. And you have a bunch of people going to jail that just entered into the Capitol, barely even protested. I mean, there were some violent people and everything, but a lot of nonviolent people, just by the act of being there, have been thrown in jail for years. I think the guy that put his feet on Nancy Pelosi's table, I think he got like 20 years or something crazy like that. And then you compare that, Justin Pearson and that other Justin in Tennessee, and this person had no idea. She thought, she's like, well, they were kicked out. The people they represent, they no longer are represented by them. I was like, they were reinstated the next day.
Yeah.
Like it's not like some crazy thing. And on top of that, they were disrupting the process. There've also been one. I think it was Justin Pearson or one of them was on camera throwing hot coffee at another incident on another congressperson, which is assault and battery. Yeah. So these people, like the iron law of woke projection is solid. It makes me think, when I hear people put forward their view, it's like, am I the crazy one? And it made me think about that, like with the vaccine. It's like with everyone around me is saying like we need to do this, and it's so clear to me that I shouldn't do this and I shouldn't bend the knee to this, and that's so dumb and it doesn't work. Like it makes me kind of introspectively think about it. But after I think about it for a few minutes, I realize like, oh yeah, like they're just projecting, and the people that are projecting this thing onto other people know very little about any of the cultural phenomenon, the incidents, the actual history, the facts of the matter on the ground. and that to me means that one side has it right, the other side has it wrong.
Yeah, I I think the other thing, just to highlight your example of Justin Pearson and the other Justin, and they're, you know, as if it's even remotely comparable to say, well, what about them? Those people aren't represented. Okay, so two people lost like the, quote unquote privilege of being a state senator or representative for people, and you're somehow trying to compare that to people being put in prison, and not only put in prison for years of their life. It's like, oh, this person lost their elected job, that sucks. These people got their freedom completely taken away, even if the incidents were remotely comparable, and they're not.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's ridiculous. But yeah, this, I mean, just to throw in more examples of this iron law of woke projection, you talk about people, how, someone will y- y- someone will perpetrate violence explicitly inspired by people from the left. You think about Rand Paul's neighbor and
Yeah.
him being brutally violently attacked. Not only do the people just kind of ignore the political ramifications of that, they actively cheer. They say things like Rand Paul's neighbor for president, and I'm
Yeah.
with Rand Paul's neighbor, can we get him? They're actively inciting violence like this, and then they have the gall to say, like, oh my gosh, when when people talk about a national divorce, they're inciting violence, or whatever you want to say is quote unquote inciting violence in this political rhetoric. Uh, or the shooting that happened at the baseball field with all those congressmen.
Yes, I
Again,
was just thinking that.
another person who was directly inspired by Bernie Sanders. They're not calling for him to disavow. I mean, I don't think Bernie Sanders should have to disavow. I don't think Bernie's responsible for that. But like,
Like this
the
logic, though he is. That's
exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And if I'm in a situation like that, I probably do. If someone said, "Hey, I watch Good Take Bad Take," and Donald Kimball's words here really inspired me to do this, I would come out and say, "Look, this is horrible. I can't control his actions, and the fact he took that from me is terrible. And if you listen to all of my things, these horrible things are not condoned." But I just want to make absolutely clear that, of course, nothing I say should ever be taken that way. I probably would. I don't think I should have to, but these people act as though they are completely immune from this, when they completely ignore the situations that happen on their side all the time. I mean, like, the, just the most pertinent, relevant, recent example of this is the Nashville shooters, where the trans person came in, literally murdered children, and then people were talking about how they were scared for the lives of trans people in the wake of this. What are you talking about? Like, we right now are talking about actual deaths of children at the hands of this person, and people are saying we need a trans remembrance bravery day type thing, and announcements. Nancy Pelosi, I think, was talking about that, and or no, it might have been the White House spokesperson. But you know, I mean, that's the level of gaslighting projection that they will engage in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, to our next take. This is Senator Mark Warner. I believe he's a senator from Virginia, where I just came back from, and he's got this amazing take here. Holding the entire global financial system hostage for draconian cuts to veterans' benefits, drug trafficking enforcement, and social security offices is so completely irresponsible. It's time to raise the debt limit, just like we did in a bipartisan way 3 times under Trump. What do you think? Oh, and he is a Democrat, for
Yeah.
anyone who's not
Yes.
familiar
Yeah. I was like, oh man, you Democrats agreeing with Trump. I thought,
with
it's always so funny how the worst stuff is bipartisan. Another person, very similar takes to who I was talking about earlier about the viewing like red states and things as the problem and how they're segregating people and all this stuff. This person I was talking to about the debt ceiling, and she was like, she's like, well, that's why the government exists, to raise the debt ceiling. Like these people who compare how the government functions to their own personal finances, like they don't know what they're talking about. And I was like, it's pretty simple, man. Like we take in not enough money to cover the bills that we have, and we're going to go get another credit card. Like that's an analogy, but it's about right, right? Like we are raising how much debt we can take on. And and her point was that, like, well, when the way it's supposed to work is that when there are good times, the government's not supposed to charge much in its taxes, and when there's bad times, the government is supposed to spend. It's like, well, you can't spend a bunch of money if you haven't collected in the first place, so that logic automatically goes out the window. And then two, the good times are brought on by the fact that the government decides it's not going to charge people, so it doesn't make much sense at all. You know, it's I mean, we hit this every single time, right? This comes up. They said they did it 3 times under Trump, and it's like, yeah, like throw through these huge budget proposals and huge bills and get all the spending and things they want in there so that their friends can get their take, and no one can ever read where it's actually going to. And then the second we say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that, and to be fair, I don't think the Republicans are doing it in good faith. Like they're doing it for purely political purposes. But the second, the voice of the people or the opposition says, hey, please don't raise this debt ceiling, they gaslight us. They say, well, you don't care about poor homeless vets with one arm on them.
Yeah.
Or, like, how you're going to go persecute those drugs. Yeah, it's like, man, if you wanted Social Security to work, you probably should have never had it in the first place. If you wanted veterans to have benefits, you could solve all of it by never sending them to go fight wars in the first place. So they're just gaslighting, and they're gaslighting to get an extension on their credit card. That's all it is.
Yep, exactly. I think the fact that he's citing the bipartisan thing cracks me up the
Yeah.
most. Like it's so transparent how politicians work, just in that the moment you're you're supposed to vilify Trump, the moment you're supposed to fall on board and say he's the most evil, incompetent, uh treacherous person we've ever seen in this office ever. People are like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then the moment that just like not in the literally in the middle of vilifying him, since he's running for president again, you can just say, hey, look, we did this 3 times under Trump. It was bipartisan, like it's just so
Yeah.
obvious. Um, and I don't know how anyone can take people seriously when they say things like this, because if he made the argument that was like even even saying something like even Trump needed to acknowledge this, that to me would make a much more compelling point than saying we did it
Mm.
in a bipartisan way 3 times under Trump. Like, to, and this is maybe one of the frustrating things, because I think generally speaking, I I'm probably in the minority on that, because I think a lot of people do love the idea of bipartisanship. I think we've talked about that before, but really, once you start to see through the ruse of bipartisanship, then you understand what's going on. It's like, okay, if we're talking about uh the 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 debt ceiling being raised, what agreements usually come to when that happens? Oh, it talks about spending more money in Ukraine, spending more money on like social security, and spending more money on government bureaucracies, and giving the military more money in addition to all that. Then the debt ceiling gets to be raised once you
Uh,
get all these wasteful projects. And it's like, if people realized what the majority of bipartisan action was, like on the federal level, that's what it is. It's paying bureaucrats money so that they can go home and say, look, I got you all this money, vote for me again. Or, well, donate to my campaign so I can get reelected. And on the state level, most of the bipartisan action is like, we named our state national rock type, the most useless stuff. And that's the best kind of bipartisan action usually.
I love how he uses the word draconian cuts, as if any time like you reduce the power of the government, like that's somehow draconian to do.
Yeah.
Like it's like well, what do you ask? You can get to the how absurd that statement is. Like, why do you want to raise the debt limit? Well, because we need to have more money. Well, why do you need to have more money? So we can do all the things that we want to do to you. And it's like, well,
Right.
I don't know. It's something about that seems funny to me.
Yeah, yeah, no,
I
I
don't have much more
agree.
to add on this one.
No, I don't think it's a particularly deep take, but
It's just
I
a
think
bad take.
it's just a bad one.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
Virginia, vote him out.
You please, please. I don't have a lot of faith they will, but
Yeah.
please do if you can. Okay. And the last take comes from Matt Walsh, who tweets a quote tweet of Tom Elliott, who has a video of Biden, and Biden is. I mean, what's really crazy is watching this video. Oh my gosh, like It's insane. So just the way he slurs his
Dementia
words, and
Biden.
yeah, it's actually nutty. Anyway, so the quote, just to spare you from watching that, the quote is, Biden says, "I'm making it mandatory for airlines to compensate passengers for delayed or canceled flights with free meals, hotels, taxis, cash miles, and or travel vouchers, and that's all on top of the cost of refunding your ticket." So I don't know if he's doing this via an executive action or if he's urging Congress or what, but it sounds like he's trying to make airlines pay a lot more, um, based on cancellations and things like that. So Matt Walsh quote tweets this saying, "If the federal government wanted to make air travel easier and more efficient, it would abolish the TSA and do away with the pointless security theater that makes no one safer and wastes everyone's time. The TSA is so incompetent that it's been 20 years and they still haven't completely standardized their procedures across all airports. The TSA process is slightly different depending on what airport you're in, which is insane given that standardized security is supposed to be the one single benefit of this system.
Yeah.
Also, please remember that the TSA has never prevented a terrorist attack. Not one single attempted terror attack has been thwarted by a TSA agent." What do you think, Britt?
Um, so he's right, and it's good. Kind of, I not the angle I necessarily would have taken to attack this whole thing. It's like man, like the government sure is gung ho about penalizing a private company when they don't perform, but if the government doesn't perform, they just ask for more
Yeah.
money. That being aside, that's a way easier point to make than this, and it probably would resonate better with people. Uh, but he's absolutely correct about the TSA. My family has been worked for the airlines for now 2 generations, and the TSA sucks. They're just the worst. I have a picture on my phone that I meant to use back when I was traveling to New Mexico for Good Take Bad Take, and it's a sign at the TSA era, and it says "Not on my watch!" exclamation point. And it's like, man, like these people don't do, and these TSA people are so unimpressive, so grumpy, terrible customer service when they're tested, right? So when you have an actual federal agency come in, hires a contractor, say, hey, figure out how to get a gun through here, right? Using all different types of methods or some sort of explosive. TSA fails in something like 91% of the efforts. That means not over 9 times out of 10, 91 times out of 100, they fail to catch with all the fancy stuff, with all the ability to make you walk through all these x-rays and things. They can't stop 91 of out of 100 attempts to bring something that is banned through it. And it was really hilarious to me, man, because I actually on my keychain, I've got pepper spray on it, and I flew to that's a banned substance, obviously, on a plane. I flew to New Mexico with that in my bag, unbeknownst to me, with it in my backpack that I carried onto the plane, and I flew back, with that sign, not on my watch. Apparently, yes, on your watch because I got it through. So yeah, the TSA sucks. It's bad. They always will ask for more money even though they fail, and they will get it even though they fail.
That's really funny. Yeah, having just come back literally yesterday from flying from Virginia, the funny thing is I didn't even see the the initial like Biden take first. I just saw Matt Walsh's take here, and I was like, oh my gosh, you are so accurate, and you're making my heart sing. First, I mean, the thing is with Matt Walsh, he dies on really weird hills
Yes.
sometimes. And I mean, like literally the other day, and I shared it with a friend who was like, "This seems like tongue in cheek," and I don't know if it was or not. I genuinely don't know. I think it was, but he's talking about like bicycle lanes and stuff, and
Yes.
he's.
Yeah, that's
I
pretty
mean, like I
funny.
saw that, and I'm like, what? Why are you dying on this hill of all hills? But this one, oh my gosh, this take is just top tier, and it gives me hope a little bit for Matt Walsh. But I agree with your first critique in that, yeah, like there's a much better way to criticize the idea of mandating airlines supplement all this kind of stuff. Like I do think that there are situations where ideally the the airlines would take more responsibility for certain things, but
The
when you
best way
have
is you
such a
just don't fly with them again, right? Like
right,
they already
exactly.
pay the penalty if they suck.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The problem, of course, being the federal government's involvement already usually,
Yes, subsidizes.
exempts them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're like, oh, I don't have to, I can get away with, doing all this bad, annoying stuff. Anyway, all that being said, uh, yeah, Matt Walsh's take is correct, and it is funny because even in the states of Washington and Virginia, which it's not like you know oh the podunk state of Washington, or the small town flyover state of Virginia. Like, these are major states, and their TSA systems are different from each other, and that alone is really, really funny to me. So um yeah, the TSA is one of those things where people have their privacy violated. They are inconvenienced literally by hours and time. Like, you think about the lost revenue in terms of people missing flights and connections because of long security lines from the TSA specifically, and there's so much loss of potential there because of this specific institution, as well as privacy violations that does literally nothing. But people, the TSA is probably even the bunt of more jokes than most, but people generally would feel safe because of it. And it's the perfect illustration for government, where it's like, at best they're incompetent, and at worst they violate your privacy,
Yeah.
and they violate things,
Oh,
in
that's
a
good.
horribly demonstrative or vindictive way. And the fact that we all put up with this is kind of insane and ridiculous. And I really do hope that we move on, to, like, if we can normalize the idea of abolishing the TSA, that will be the first step into normalizing the ideal of abolishing other unnecessary, wasteful government departments. Maybe education next.
It's just what's crazy is, and I've talked about it before, but like I remember being able to go with my dad like to the gate to see him off on a flight.
Yeah,
This is pre 9/11, and we just consider that normal. It didn't matter. And then after 9/11, the government uses all this fear and then sets up this entirely needless infrastructure that they tell everyone is necessary to be safe and all this stuff. And 20 years later, we're here, and it's like you're saying, it's at best they're incompetent and they don't actually do their mandate. At worst, they are that. Plus, they are vindictive and they're using it, to do bad things to other people. So it's just like we it just took 20 years. It didn't even take 20 years. It took like 5 years for that to become accepted. We just accepted it. And
yeah,
I thought about the COVID stuff, what was going on. And it's like, well, it's the same justification for all the masking and the vax mandates and all this stuff. And I was honestly a little bit black pilled on it. And that, like, well, when I'm traveling and I see the TSA and it's still here 20 years later, what's to make me think that, the COVID stuff won't be here? So it's kind of a really nice silver lining. And I'm not a silver lining, but a white pill that it's gone, right? It means
yeah,
that those things can be teared apart. And I agree with you that if the TSA got teared apart, it'd probably catapult into other things as well.
yeah. I agree. And you know what? As back and forth as I am on a lot of Matt Walsh's takes, if he's starting here, then I'm happy, and
Yeah.
let's hopefully continue keep this train of thought going. Normalize it within the conservative circles. Normalize it
Yes.
in the Daily Wire crowd. I'm happy with that. So
Agreed.
hope that continues. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. That's our show for today. We will catch you on the next one. Just a reminder to like and share and all that good stuff. If you've enjoyed that, it helps us out a ton. And hopefully you'll stick around for the next one, and we'll see you on the next episode.